23 years before anyone knew his name, before worlds whispered about the human who changed everything, there was only a quiet young man named Daniel Rook. He lived the kind of life nobody sings about. Small apartment, small job, and small dreams, all tucked inside a crowded human district on the edge of the galactic trade hub. Humanity was new to the stars back then, still learning the rules, still walking softly around species older, richer, and stronger. Daniel never thought about honor or pride. He only wanted to earn enough credits to help his mother back home. Working as a cargo clerk wasn't noble, but it was clean, honest, and peaceful. Peaceful mattered to him. Peaceful was safe. That peace ended on the day the alien noble arrived. Her name was Lady, daughter of the High Talon of the Dominion, a species famous for their cold beauty and colder tempers. Their armor shimmered like polished obsidian, and their voices carried the sharpness of someone who never had to kneel. They weren't cruel by nature, just proud in the way that ancient conquerors often are. They saw young, vulnerable species the way a teacher sees new students, full of potential, but prone to mistakes that needed correction. Daniel was not thinking about aliens or politics that morning. He was thinking about his broken wrist scanner, the stack of shipments behind him, and the ache in his feet after 3 double shifts in a row. He stood at his station, tired but calm, checking off crate IDs while the dock hall hummed with the normal noise of ships arriving and leaving. Then the noble entourage entered, armored guards first, banners second, lady last. Everyone froze. Everyone but Daniel. He didn't even look up at first. He muttered, "Dock number, please," the way he always did when someone approached. There was a sharp silence. A cold, ringing voice answered, "You speak without being addressed." Daniel finally lifted his head. Lady stood before him, tall, silver-skinned, eyes like burning blue glass. Her armor shone with ceremonial markings. Her expression did not show anger, only surprise, like she had discovered a pebble talking back to a mountain. Daniel blinked. I didn't mean anything wrong, ma'am. I'm just checking." Her hand snapped through the air. Not to strike, not to harm, but to dismiss. A gesture small enough to be polite, yet sharp enough to cut a person in half inside. "You will speak," she said quietly, "only when spoken to. That is the way of the stars, human." Dozens of workers watched. Some bowed their heads as if her words had weight they could feel on their backs. Others pretended to not see, afraid of being noticed. A few whispered that humans should learn their place, that survival meant obedience, that the young noble had every right. Daniel's throat tightened. He felt the heat of humiliation rising under his collar. He wasn't a fighter. He wasn't brave. He wasn't anything special. He only wanted to do his job and go home. He could have argued, he could have apologized, he could have bowed like everyone else. Instead, he did nothing. Absolutely nothing. He simply lowered his scanner, stepped aside from his own workbench, and without speaking a single word, walked away. He didn't glare. He didn't protest. He didn't try to reclaim his dignity. He just walked. The hall watched him leave in stunned silence. A few humans whispered that he was weak. A few aliens murmured that he was wise. Lady's expression flickered, just for a moment, as if she had expected resistance and was unsettled by the gentle way he refused to give her even that. Daniel walked until the hall noise faded behind him. He leaned against a wall near the maintenance shafts, breathing slowly, feeling his heartbeat throb in his ears. Shame burned through him like fire. He wasn't angry at her. He was angry at himself for being too small to speak back, too scared to stand tall, too human in a universe that admired strength. He whispered to himself, "It's fine, it doesn't matter, I'm nobody." But even he didn't believe his own words. Because sometimes humiliation isn't loud. Sometimes it's quiet, too quiet, like a seed planted deep inside a person. A seed that someday grows into something far bigger than the moment that created it. Daniel didn't know it yet. Lady didn't know it either. But what happened that morning would echo for decades, across star systems, into palaces and battlefields and councils far above his simple world. The human who walked away without a word would one day return with a voice loud enough to shake empires. The incident with Lady might have lasted only a few seconds, but the story spread across the trade hub in hours. Dock workers talked. Pilots whispered. Even vendors in the lower markets repeated it while cutting fruit or fixing damaged drones. Not because Daniel had done anything dramatic. He hadn't shouted, fought, or resisted. It was the opposite. People couldn't stop talking because he had walked away without a single word. Some said it was humility. Others said it was weakness. A few said it was the quiet strength of a man who refused to play a game he never asked to join. Daniel didn't know about any of this. He spent the evening in his small apartment, sitting at a metal table that wobbled when he leaned on it. A single lamp flickered above him, casting a soft yellow over the cracked walls. He ran his fingers through his hair, trying to push away the memory of the noble's dismissive gesture. He didn't want to remember her cold voice or the eyes that saw him as nothing. But memories have sharp edges, and they cut even when you try to forget. He whispered, "Why didn't I say something?" But no answer came, only silence. Outside his window, ships rose and descended like falling stars, their engines humming across the night. He wondered how it felt to be someone important, someone who didn't tremble when a powerful alien looked at them. He wondered what humans could become if they stopped bowing and started believing in themselves. He didn't sleep much that night. By morning, everything had already changed. When Daniel arrived at the docks, conversations stopped the moment he stepped into the hall. Workers glanced at him in ways he didn't understand, some with sympathy, others with a strange curiosity. A tall reptilian worker approached him first. "You," said slowly, "are the human who angered Lady." Daniel blinked. "I didn't anger her, I was just doing my job." Tilted his scaled head. "Most species would beg forgiveness, you walked away." "That's not strength," Daniel murmured. "I was just tired." "Tired or not," said, "you changed something." Daniel didn't know what that meant. He didn't want anything changed. He wanted to finish his shift and avoid attention. But the galaxy had already placed a spotlight on him, whether he liked it or not. As he moved through the day's work, a strange mix of reactions followed him. Humans nodded at him with a quiet respect, as if he had done something brave on their behalf. A few non-humans watched him longer than usual, studying him with curious eyes, trying to understand the quiet man who refused to kneel. But not everyone admired him. A group of soldiers arrived near midday, carrying decorated spears and wearing dark helmets with glowing edges. They scanned the crowd with purposeful steps. The hall stiffened instantly. The never appeared without reason. One of them called out, "Where is the human named Daniel Rook?" Daniel froze, his heart dropped into his stomach. Every worker turned toward him at once. He wanted to hide, to disappear behind crate stacks, but he knew running would make things worse. So he stepped forward slowly, hands raised to show peace. "I'm Daniel," he said quietly. "What do you want?" The lead soldier handed him a small metal tablet with a glowing seal. "Lady requests your presence." Daniel's breath caught. "Now." Immediately. He felt every pair of eyes on him. Some filled with worry, others with fear, a few with something close to hope, like they wanted to see what would happen if a simple human stood face to face with alien nobility again. "Do I have a choice?" Daniel asked. The soldier answered with perfect honesty, "None." Daniel nodded slowly. A cold, heavy feeling settled inside his chest. He didn't hate Lady, he wasn't angry at her. But he feared what someone with her power could do. A noble could ruin his life with a gesture, the same way she humiliated him yesterday. Still, he followed the soldiers. Every step echoed through the hall like a slow drumbeat. Workers silently moved aside, making a path for him. As he walked, Daniel whispered to himself, "Just get through this. Don't cause trouble, don't make things worse." He didn't know that trouble was already there, waiting for him. He didn't know the noble had summoned him not for punishment, but for something far stranger. Something that would twist the path of both their lives, and eventually, 23 years later, change the shape of the entire galaxy. The soldiers led Daniel through a series of polished corridors he had never seen before. The walls gleamed with a strange metallic light, smooth and cold, decorated with symbols that seemed to shift slightly when he looked away. He felt smaller with every step, a human in a world built for beings who had walked the stars for thousands of years. Finally, they stopped at a massive door carved with the crest. Two soldiers knocked sharply, and a soft voice from inside called, "Enter." Daniel's pulse raced. His hands were sweaty, and he felt the familiar tightening in his chest, the one he had tried to ignore all his life whenever someone bigger, stronger, or richer stared at him. He stepped inside. The chamber was enormous. Light poured from crystal panels above, scattering across smooth obsidian floors. At the center, Lady sat on a low platform, not on a throne as he had expected, but a chair that somehow seemed like it belonged to the air itself. Her expression was calm, unreadable, but her eyes burned with the same intensity from yesterday. "Daniel Rook," she said softly, voice carrying the authority of a dozen worlds. "You walked away yesterday, without words, without apology. Why?" Daniel swallowed. He had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times in his mind during the long night, but now words failed him. He began, then stopped. "I don't know, I couldn't speak." She tilted her head, studying him. Most humans would have shouted, most would have begged, most would have tried to show respect in the only way they knew, fear. And yet you walked. Daniel's face warmed. "I wasn't trying to impress anyone, I was just afraid." Her eyes softened just slightly. "Afraid," she repeated. "Interesting, you are not like the others. Your species bends too easily to power. But you do not yield when nothing is asked of you. You do not lie to survive." Daniel blinked. The words felt strange. Not humiliating, not praise exactly, something else. Something heavier, something that made him feel both small and seen. "Why are you telling me this?" Daniel asked, his voice barely more than a whisper. Lady leaned forward. "Because, human, you may not realize it, but you carry something rare. Not courage in the sense of fighting, but courage in the sense of truth. You are unwilling to bow when the bow does not matter. You walk forward even when no one applauds. That makes you dangerous in ways most cannot understand." Daniel felt a shiver run down his spine. Dangerous? To a noble, he was nothing. He was a clerk, a human barely known beyond his own neighborhood. I don't want to be dangerous," he said honestly. "Few do," she replied. "Most fear what they are capable of, most will hide it, but you do not hide, and that makes you significant." The words felt like a puzzle turning inside him. He wanted to argue. He wanted to laugh at the absurdity. A human significant, against nobles, against the galaxy's great powers. Yet a strange fire began to stir inside him, a fire he had never noticed before. A fire that whispered he was not as small as he had always believed. Lady's gaze did not waver. "I do not understand humans well. I see only weakness in most. But you are different, and that difference will not be ignored." For a long moment the chamber was silent. Daniel felt the weight of her words pressing down, yet somehow lifting him at the same time. He realized something. The world did not decide who mattered. Action, choice, even silence could define a life more than rank, more than armor, more than power. He took a slow breath. I won't pretend to be someone I'm not. I won't bow unless it matters." Lady nodded once sharply. "Good. Perhaps the galaxy needs more humans like you, or perhaps it needs one. Only time will tell." Then she motioned to the door. "Leave now. Return to your world, human. Remember this lesson. Even in submission, your spirit matters. Even in fear, your choice matters. Do not forget it." Daniel turned, feeling a strange mix of relief and resolve. He walked back through the gleaming corridors, each step heavier with meaning. He realized that humiliation yesterday had not destroyed him. It had planted a seed. A seed that might one day grow taller than the very towers of the... Outside, the sky was the same as ever, ships soaring, engines humming, but Daniel saw it differently. The world had not changed, but he had. And in that quiet realization, he understood something deeper. Power was not always in weapons, gold, or armies. Sometimes it was in the courage to stand in silence and still walk away. As he returned to his simple apartment that night, he didn't feel weak. He felt awake. Somewhere deep inside, a promise was forming. A promise that one day he would not just walk, he would stride. The months after that day passed quietly on the surface, but the universe never waits for anyone to grow comfortable. Daniel returned to his simple life at the docks, carrying with him a strange weight, the memory of Lady's words. At first, it felt heavy, like a stone pressed against his chest. But gradually it became a spark, small, almost imperceptible, yet impossible to ignore. He worked harder than ever, not for wealth, not for recognition, but to feel capable, to feel prepared. Each shipment he scanned, each cargo crate he lifted, each calculation he double-checked became a small victory over the lingering doubt that had haunted him for years. He began running through the crowded streets before dawn, lifting metal scraps to build strength in his arms, even if no one saw it. Humanity, the galaxy's youngest starfaring species, had always been underestimated. Every day, Daniel witnessed it, alien species walking past, assuming humans were weak, soft, or easily controlled. And yet Daniel began to notice something else. The smallest gestures of resistance, the quiet competence of humans who refused to bow in fear, drew attention. Respect. Curiosity. That spark he carried inside him began to resonate with others around him. It was during one of these ordinary days that the test arrived. The trade hub shuddered as alarms rang across every station. Daniel was scanning cargo when the announcement boomed. A rogue freighter had breached docking protocols. It carried unknown energy signatures, dangerously unstable, and was drifting toward a populated sector. Panic spread among the docks, but Daniel's mind focused. He had seen chaos before in minor ways, misplaced shipments, faulty loaders, but this was different. Lives were at stake. Soldiers rushed in, attempting to manage the crisis, but most froze at the sight of the unstable vessel. Even the officers hesitated, scanning their controls with careful calculation. Then, without thinking, Daniel ran toward the control terminal, ignoring the shouts to step back. He began recalculating trajectories, rerouting cargo lifts, stabilizing energy flows. A lieutenant approached him, scowling. "Human, step aside, you cannot." Daniel didn't stop. He barely glanced at the alien. Instead, he adjusted the freighter's trajectory manually, overriding the automated systems with a combination of instinct and learned calculation. Every second felt like a lifetime. Sparks flew, panels flashed warnings. The freighter drifted closer. Daniel's hands shook, but his mind remained clear. Then a sudden surge of energy erupted from the freighter, knocking him backward. Pain shot through his arm, but he pressed on. He whispered to himself, "I can't fail, not now." Finally, with a last precise sequence of commands, the freighter slowed, stabilized, and came to a safe halt just yards from the docking bay. The lights returned to normal. The alarms silenced. Workers and soldiers stared, disbelief etched on every face. Daniel sank to his knees, exhausted. His uniform was torn, his body bruised, but he had done what no one else could. Lady arrived moments later, walking through the chaos like a shadow of authority. She observed him silently, her eyes scanning the damage, then settling on him. For the first time, Daniel saw not judgment, but a spark of approval. "You acted without orders," she said softly. "You risked yourself for lives that are not yours. That is human courage." Daniel shook his head. "I just did what had to be done. Anyone could." "No," she interrupted, her voice firm. "Not anyone. Most would wait. Most would follow protocol, freeze, or hide. But you chose action. You did not let fear decide for you. That is why the galaxy will remember humans differently. That is why you will be remembered." Daniel felt his chest tighten. The shame he had carried for walking away 23 years ago now felt like a distant echo, replaced by something he had never known: pride. Quiet, simple, but fierce. Lady extended a hand, not as a noble to a servant, but as a recognition of someone extraordinary. "Today was your first test, human. There will be many more, and each time you must remember, strength is not the absence of fear, but the courage to act despite it." Daniel took a deep breath, feeling the exhaustion melt into determination. He did not yet understand the magnitude of her words. He did not yet understand the challenges awaiting humanity in the wider galaxy. But he understood one thing clearly: he would never walk away from responsibility again. Not now, not ever. And somewhere deep inside, a quiet fire flared. The same fire that had begun the day he had refused to bow. The fire that would one day grow into something no alien noble could ignore, something that would echo across the stars. The galaxy had just glimpsed the first spark of human greatness, and Daniel Rook was its unlikely flame. Years passed quickly, but the memory of that first encounter with Lady never faded from Daniel's mind. Every step he took in the galaxy carried the weight of her gaze, the judgment, the quiet recognition, and the challenge to rise beyond what anyone expected of a human. He had grown taller in reputation, stronger in skill, yet the scar of humiliation from 23 years ago still lingered in a quiet corner of his heart. Daniel had become more than a cargo clerk. He was now a coordinator for interstellar relief missions, a human entrusted with life-or-death decisions in sectors far beyond his old trade hub. Despite his growth, he remained humble, carrying the lessons of patience, restraint, and courage learned long ago. But even humility has its limits. Even the quietest heart can boil when reminded of past shame. It happened during a council meeting on Prime, a neutral planet where humans and dozens of other species debated trade, security, and alliances. Daniel was representing the humans, an underdog species often underestimated, often mocked, often ignored. He presented a plan to protect civilian shipping lanes from pirate raids, meticulously calculated and based on months of careful observation. When he finished, a noble scoffed. The words were deliberate, sharp, designed to humiliate. "And what makes a human think it understands strategy beyond a dock worker's logic?" she said, her voice echoing through the council chamber. Her family's insignia glinted on her. Recognition struck Daniel immediately. She was Lady's cousin, a woman known for ruthlessness and arrogance, trained to belittle any human daring to rise. The chamber fell silent. All eyes shifted to Daniel. Some were curious, some were amused, some, the humans, feared the inevitable humiliation. For a moment, Daniel's chest tightened. Memories of that day at the docks, 23 years ago, flashed in his mind. He remembered the flicker of her eyes, the dismissal, the weight of being seen as nothing. He could feel the old shame bubbling, a whisper telling him to shrink back, to lower his voice, to pretend. But he didn't. He stood taller, straightened his back, and let his voice carry across the room. "Because strategy is not measured by arrogance or birthright," he said calmly, yet firmly. "It is measured by understanding, calculation, and the courage to act when others hesitate. And yes, humans have proven all three." Murmurs spread through the chamber, some raised eyebrows. Humans exchanged stunned glances. The noble's smirk faltered. Daniel continued, "You may see me as a dock worker or a clerk or a human beneath your notice, but today I speak not as a clerk. I speak as someone responsible for the lives of thousands. The galaxy may underestimate us, but history has shown that courage is not bound to species, nor is wisdom bound to rank. If you doubt humanity, I invite you to watch, not mock, how we act when the stakes are real." The noble opened her mouth, but no words came. The room seemed to hold its breath. She could not diminish him, not with words, not with authority, not with lineage. A soft voice finally spoke from the back of the chamber, Lady herself. She had arrived quietly, without ceremony, observing from the shadows. "Well said," she murmured, almost to herself. Then louder she added, "The human is correct. Judgment does not belong to the arrogant, but to those who prove themselves in deeds." Daniel felt something he had never felt before, the weight of validation not from the galaxy at large, but from the very being who had humiliated him years ago. Her presence alone sent a message that the past had not broken him. It had forged him. The noble's face reddened, a mix of anger and awe. She stepped back, realizing that the human standing before her was no longer the frightened man from the docks. He had become something more. Someone who could walk into the council and hold the gaze of a proud noble without flinching, without bowing, without hesitation. When the session ended, Daniel walked out into the quiet hallways of Prime. He looked up at the twin suns hanging low over the planet's horizon and felt the fire that had started decades ago in his heart burn brighter than ever. It was no longer simply about proving himself. It was about proving the potential of his entire species. He whispered, "We are stronger than they believe, stronger than I once believed." And for the first time, he realized that the humiliation from 23 years ago, the cold dismissal, the judgment, the laughter of nobles, had not been a weakness. It had been the beginning. The beginning of a path that would carry humanity across the stars and leave no doubt about their worth. Daniel Rook had walked away once, but now he walked forward, and the galaxy would never forget the human who refused to bow. Years had hardened Daniel, but the galaxy never stopped testing him. Every mission, every negotiation, every life-or-death decision reminded him that survival was never guaranteed, and respect had to be earned, again and again. Yet he had grown in ways even he could not fully measure. The quiet human who once walked away in humiliation now walked among empires with confidence, his calm eyes carrying the weight of experience. The test came not on a battlefield, but in the Council of the Unified Star Alliance, a gathering of species older and wiser than humanity. A crisis had erupted near the cluster, a region known for treacherous magnetic storms and pirate activity. Several human freighters were trapped, their communications jammed. Panic and blame filled the chamber. Many species whispered that humans were reckless, too inexperienced to navigate such danger. Daniel listened quietly. He had learned that words spoken in anger were often empty. Silence, measured and thoughtful, spoke louder. He waited until all the murmurs and accusations had filled the room. Then he stood, and every eye turned to him. The council expected hesitation. The council expected uncertainty. Instead, Daniel spoke with calm authority. Humanity has faced storms worse than these. Our ships may be small, but our crews are adaptable. We know how to navigate when others cannot. If you allow me to coordinate a rescue, I guarantee every freighter will return safely. Gasps rippled through the chamber. No one had dared to speak so boldly, not against centuries of tradition, not against empires that measured age and lineage above skill and courage. Even Lady, watching quietly from the back, tilted her head, curiosity flickering in her eyes. "You are too confident," a elder hissed, his scales bristling. "Do you believe a human can command such a task?" Daniel smiled softly, not with arrogance but with clarity. "I do not rely on belief. I rely on preparation, knowledge, and the ability to act without fear. If you doubt us, watch. If you interfere, lives will be lost. The choice is yours." The chamber fell silent. Even the most skeptical species could feel the truth in his words. This was no human pleading for recognition. This was a human demanding respect through competence, through courage, through action. When the council reluctantly agreed, Daniel wasted no time. He coordinated the human pilots, recalculated courses around magnetic turbulence, and devised emergency protocols in real time. He communicated with alien freighter captains patiently, carefully translating complex human procedures into universal commands. By the time the first ships emerged from the storm, the council had begun to see what he meant. One by one, the freighters returned intact, every crew alive, every vessel unharmed. Cheers erupted from human delegates. The older species stared in stunned silence. Daniel did not smile much. He had no time to savor victory. His eyes, steady and unwavering, scanned the horizon. There was always more work, always more to do. Later, in the quiet corridors after the rescue, Lady approached him. She looked at him with something more than curiosity now, respect, perhaps even admiration. "You have grown," she said, voice low but firm. "I remember the human who walked away 23 years ago. I did not expect to see him here, standing taller than some nobles." Daniel shook his head slightly. "I walked away because I had nothing to prove. Now I have a responsibility, not just to myself but to all humans, to show that we are more than what they believe." She nodded slowly. "You have become a symbol. Others will see your courage and measure themselves against it. You carry more than skill, you carry hope." Daniel felt the weight of her words settle over him. Humiliation had once been his teacher, pain had been his companion, and fear had been his shadow. But now, through years of trials and quiet victories, he understood the truth. Greatness was not given. It was earned. It was chosen. And humanity, small, underestimated, often mocked, could achieve it. He looked out the corridor's panoramic window at the stars, countless points of light stretching into infinity. Each one reminded him of every challenge humanity had faced, every trial they had endured, every whisper of doubt they had overcome. And for the first time, he felt the enormity of their potential, the power of a species unafraid to rise above expectation. He whispered to himself, softly, humbly, yet firmly, We will not be ignored. We are stronger than they believe. Lady, standing silently beside him, said nothing. She did not need to. She had witnessed the human who had walked away decades ago transform into the human who now commanded the respect of the galaxy. A quiet, undeniable truth had formed between them. The underestimation of humanity would be the galaxy's greatest mistake. And Daniel, once small, once humiliated, now carried a fire that would not be extinguished. Not by nobles, not by fear, not by the vast indifference of the stars. He was ready for what came next. 23 years after the day Daniel Rook had quietly walked away from humiliation, the galaxy knew his name. But it wasn't just a name, it was a symbol. A symbol of what humans could achieve when courage, patience, and determination were combined. The final test came unexpectedly. A coalition of alien fleets, fueled by centuries of prejudice and fear, launched an incursion into human-controlled sectors. Their intent was clear: crush humanity before it could rise further and remind the galaxy that humans were expendable. Daniel stood on the command deck of the Aurora Vanguard, the flagship of the human fleet, his hands steady on the controls. Beside him, the bridge buzzed with activity, pilots, engineers, and strategists who looked to him not as a clerk, not as a simple human, but as a leader. Every eye in the room waited for direction. Every mind hung on his decisions. He remembered the young man who had walked away from Lady's gaze, the human who had been humiliated and dismissed. That man would have frozen, panicked, or run. But that man no longer existed. In his place stood someone forged by years of challenge, shaped by failure and strengthened by quiet victories. The alien fleets advanced, their weapons shimmering with deadly energy. Panic began to rise among some of the younger human pilots. Daniel's voice cut through the tension like a beacon. Focus! Follow the plan. We fight smart, not reckless. We protect each other. That is how humans survive. He directed the ships with precision, using tactics that no alien fleet had anticipated. Small human ships darted between massive capital vessels, using speed and agility to create openings. Daniel coordinated strikes that maximized efficiency and minimized risk. Slowly, the invaders' lines faltered. Confusion rippled through their formations. Lady, observing from a nearby neutral station, could not hide her astonishment. She had seen humans act bravely before, but this was strategy, skill, and audacity rolled into one undeniable truth. Humans were not weak. They were not insignificant. They were something more. The battle reached its peak. Daniel noticed a squadron of enemy ships attempting to flank the human fleet, cutting off retreat paths. Without hesitation, he took a personal shuttle, leading a small team of elite pilots directly into the heart of the flank. His movements were calculated, decisive, and fearless. Explosions lit the void around them, but Daniel's focus never wavered. He coordinated attacks, diverted enemy fire, and protected his fleet with a precision born of decades of learning and quiet determination. By the time the flank was neutralized, the human fleet had regained full control. When the last enemy ship retreated, silence fell over the battlefield. The human fleet floated, battered but victorious, in the expanse of the stars. Every human pilot looked toward Daniel with awe and gratitude. He did not raise his fists in triumph, did not shout victory. He simply breathed, exhausted yet steady, feeling the weight of every life preserved. Lady arrived aboard the Aurora Vanguard, her presence calm but commanding. She looked at Daniel, and for the first time in their history, she spoke without formality. "You have surpassed everything I expected. Not just humans, but every species that once believed superiority gave them the right to dismiss others." Daniel shook his head, voice quiet but firm. "I did not do this alone. Humanity, we all did this together, and we have only just begun." She studied him, her eyes lingering on the human who had once walked away in silence. Perhaps arrogance and dismissal were never enough to define humans. Perhaps they were never meant to be measured the way others do. He smiled faintly, the fire in his chest steady, burning bright. "We walk our own path. We fight when we must. We rise when they doubt us. That is what it means to be human." The victory did more than save the fleet. It reshaped perceptions across the galaxy. Humans were no longer the timid newcomers. They were respected, feared, and admired. A species that had once been humiliated by a single noble now stood tall among stars and empires. Daniel Rook, the man who walked away without a word 23 years ago, had returned to define humanity's place in the universe, not with arrogance, but with courage, wisdom, and unyielding heart. He stood on the bridge, looking out into the endless expanse of stars. Somewhere across the void, Lady nodded silently, a recognition of the journey from humiliation to triumph. Daniel knew the galaxy would continue to challenge humans, test them, push them to the edge. But he also knew this: no force, no empire, no noble could ever underestimate humanity again. And in that moment, Daniel understood the full truth of his life. Walking away once had taught him humility. Walking forward had taught him greatness. And the stars themselves would remember the human who refused to bow.